Hey guys, Chris from Black Flag Barbell Club. Today we're going to talk about wrist wraps and how to use them, which sounds very simple, but we see a lot of people use them less than optimally, and if we can help you get a little bit more out of them, why not? So wrist wraps, very basic thing. They're stretchy, sometimes they're stiff, they'll have some kind of thumb loop, they'll have Velcro for you to attach the wrap to itself once it's all wrapped up, and it goes around your wrist. Thus the name wrist wrap. Most commonly you'll use this for bench pressing. Some people use them for a lot of things. Personally I use mine for benching, overhead press and squatting when I get heavy squats, because otherwise it gets a little bit harsh on my wrist. I would say they're the most common things that you'll be using it for, but you can use them for anything where you want wrist support. Yeah? Now that is a very important part of how they work, wrist support. Yeah? So the way that I see a lot of people use wrist wraps, and I question what are they getting out of it, is if they wrap it underneath the wrist, and they can still, this is probably a bit high. We've got the wrist joint here. If I wrap it underneath that, so let's say I do not wrap my wrist this way, but I know a few people who do. Looking at you, Angus. I think it's shit, but it works for them. Alright, so if I loop this through the thumb loop, and then put my guy through, and then, so you can see where my wrist bends, yeah? So if I wrap underneath that, I will get compression of the wrist bones, like the radius and the ulna, which will give me a little bit of support, but I can still move my wrist. Okay, now if this is what you want, fantastic. Wrap it underneath your wrist. Personally, if I am wrapping my wrist for a bench or a squat, I want to prevent wrist extension, which means I want my wrist to stay stacked and neutral. So this is a neutral wrist with a slight bend at the back. I want to prevent my wrist going further this way and extending. Okay? Now to do that, if I wrap everything underneath here, it doesn't change. Yeah? So if I want to prevent extension at my wrist, I'm going to have to bring the wrap up above the joint line. Okay? So, let me grab a texter. So if this is my joint line, you can see where my skin bunches up. Okay, so if this is my wrist joint, yeah, let's say around here, so this is the joint itself. Okay, that's where my skin bends and folds up. So when I'm wrapping said wrist, I want to not be underneath it. Yeah, I want to cover that joint, which means it's going to be pretty high on the back of my wrist. Okay? Now that doesn't mean that it's going to be all the way up here on my palm, because we can angle the wrap down. So what I will do, doesn't matter if I've got a full loop like on these gangster wraps, or just a little thumb loop like on my Titans. I'm going to put my thumb through the loop, I'm going to grab the corner of that wrap so that I have something to tension off, because I don't want to just pull on the loop. It eventually will tear the thing out. So I grab the corner of the wrap, and this I'm going to cover with the wrap. So I'm going to go like 50-50. Okay? So I'm going to tension, I'm going to cover that joint line so it's pretty high on my wrist, and then on this side it's going to be like I can change where that's going so that it doesn't have to be really high. Yeah? So I'm going to cover that joint line, and then it's going to loop back just over the top of like the fat pit at the bottom of my thumb. I'm going to go one again over the top, and then I'm going to, what would you call it, brace. I'm going to put more material higher up, and as I come up I loop it back down so that it's not covering this side. Yeah? And then the last one I'm going to do that 50-50 again. Now it looks a little bit like Chun-Li, take your thumb loop off, but I can now feel resistance this way, yeah? There's something here to stop my wrist extending, to help keep it where I want it, okay? And you can crank it as tight as you want, you get the closure, like the compression of the radius and the ulna as well, okay? So this to me is a much more effective wrist wrap, yeah? It actually supports my wrist rather than just compressing two bones and leaving all the wrist bones to do their own thing and move wherever they want. This actually gives some structural support. It is as if I was born with a bigger wrist, yeah? And then it comes into how stiff do you want the wrap, yeah? So this is relatively stretchy. I would say this isn't I wouldn't say this is the lightest wrap you can go, but it's probably like a medium to medium soft. And then if I go to something like the Titan Golds, I'll be right back. If we go to something like the Titan Golds, and this is that other style of wrist loop, thumb loop, where it's just attached to one corner. So I don't want to pull on that. I'm going to, again, hold the wrap and then go. But this is much stiffer of a wrap, yeah? I have to actually like grab it to pull it. When I'm putting it on, it's a bit more effort, but it's much stiffer for a final result. Everything is the same then. So I've got my joint line, yeah, when my skin folds up, I'm going to cover that joint line as I come up. Blocks extension. Nice and tight, stiff wrap, blah blah blah. My hand goes a different shade of color depending on the tightness that I put into the wrap. That's normal, that's fine. Don't worry about it. You don't want to be in wrist wraps very long. And that is it. So when you think of wrist wraps, think about what you're trying to achieve, yeah? Ultimately, if you feel more comfortable having it lower down and simply compressing those two forearm bones, like just squeezing here, and that movement for you is fine, then that's all good. Whatever works for you, whatever lets you lift the most weight, yeah? But in general, we find that most people are gonna feel more comfortable, more secure, less wrist pain when lifting heavier weights on the bench and the squat, that kind of thing, if they come and cover up that ability to extend, yeah? So I don't want to be under that joint line, yeah, or just riding the joint line. I want to be up above it so that it's preventing extension at the wrist, okay? I've done a lot of this video. But yeah, so if you want to block extension of the wrist, make sure that you're wrapping your wrist in a way that blocks extension, yeah? Otherwise you're maybe not getting the most out of it. You know, you paid your $80 or whatever it is for your wrist wraps. Make sure you get your money's worth, okay? Any questions about what we've talked about today, let us know. Anything else you want to see in a future video, or you want us to answer a certain question, let us know in the comments. Send us an email, info@blackflagbarbell.com.au. You can message us on Facebook at Black Flag Barbell. You can hit us up on Instagram at Black Flag Barbell. See you next time.